removing yourself from lust, removing yourself from the flesh, denying the flesh.
Yes, there will be those temptations, but you have to remember what the Word of God says, and you have to be obedient to God's Word. And it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it.
It helps you so much if you can remove it or remove yourself from it, but if you don't, how much it hinders you in the process.
Sure.
Like there's so many divorces, that can be avoided. There's so much pain and hurt and just a lot of trauma that can be avoided if, speaking as men, because I feel like men, we even fall to this a lot.
When it comes to women, like there's been situations where I've known women who still like have that thought process, I gotta get with so and so, like he's fine, like, you know, if I get with him, then that would be crazy, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that's just like the mindset that we just have to like get rid of, like just throw it away. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to season 2 of Equally Yoked
podcast.
In today's episode, we will be talking about how to stop seeking sex.
Yes. And before we even get into it, just gotta say we apologize.
Yes.
I feel like we did a terrible job.
We're sorry.
No, even talking about, like, we're saying season 2, but I feel like we didn't do a good job even letting people know that season 1 was over.
Exactly.
And so we definitely want to like start building a community with you guys. And like we saw the comments that y'all like been leaving us on different social media platforms. We've seen the DMs that y'all have been leaving us, and it's been very encouraging.
Yeah, for sure. And just to add on to that, like if y'all have any topics or things that you want us to discuss, feel free to let us know and we will try our best to respond to you. We just need to start doing better, have a better schedule for this season, but we will be better than we were last season.
Yes, because I know personally one of the things that I was struggling with was like I was allowing myself to get distracted by doing too many things.
Yeah.
And like something I've been telling myself is that all movement is in progress. And whatever, and it says like whatever the devil can't destroy, he distracts.
Yeah.
And I just feel like I was definitely in a distracted point, and I had to let a lot of things go.
Yeah, for sure. And I was the same way. Like I was just juggling way too much. And then, you know, when we were starting to do like the podcast or even, you know, trying to create our reels and shorts and stuff like that for but the platforms, like we were getting exhausted. So yeah, we definitely for sure need to be better.
Yeah. And okay, so let's jump right into it. I feel like we have to like, because it's such a strong title.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's necessary and that we just like cut to the chase, no chaser.
Yeah.
Right. And I say that because I'm going to speak for men right now, where I say that there's a lot of men that I've talked to who are men of God that are seeking relationships with women of God, but they haven't necessarily become or let a lot of the worldly things go. Right. Because a lot of men of God I've talked to, they have said that they have struggled with lust, and they've also asked me like, how do you like remove, so I'm going to ask you the question, how do you like remove sex from your relationship?
Being obedient to God's word, like point blank, period. If you want to make changes for yourself or in your relationship, you need to be obedient to God in what his word says.
Yeah. Speaking of what his word says, I was reading this earlier today, which is also one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this.
Yeah.
But I was reading Matthew 5. It was Matthew 5, verse 27. And it was saying that you have heard that it is said to those of old, you shall not commit adultery. But Jesus is talking, and he says, but I say to you that whoever looks at a woman but I'll say this. Okay, but I say to you, whoever looks at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you, for it is more profitable for you to have one of your members perish than for your whole body to be casted into hell.
Just imagine.
Yeah.
If every time we were to lust, we had to yank off a body part.
Yeah. And I
How
think
much of your body would you have left?
very little. I think the powerful part in that though is
Yeah.
he's saying just how necessary it is, like with an extreme example,
Yeah.
right? Of like how removing yourself from lust, removing yourself from the flesh, denying the flesh,
Yeah.
how much it can help you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, then where will it lead you? If it helps you so much if you can remove it or remove yourself from it, but if you don't, how much it hinders you in the
Yeah, for
process.
sure.
Like there's so many divorces, there's so that can be avoided, there's so much pain and hurt and just a lot of trauma that can be avoided if speaking as men, because I feel like men we even fall to this a lot, that if we would just not only seek relationships just for the sex.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of men have been from, I would say, just from little boys all the way up to men, because the first thing you hear as a little boy, and let's just say you're cute, is that you're gonna break women's heart.
Yeah, which is so kind of weird, but
Right? Isn't it? It's like, oh, you're gonna be breaking. And the thing about that though is like you just keep hearing it, and then a lot of men are like kind of enabling this behavior.
yeah.
Right? And you get to the point where like you are like teenage grown man, and now it's like cool to have a lot of bodies. It's cool to
Yeah.
have all these other things in order to be talking to a lot of women, to be a player, all these kind of things. It was even a movie, How to Be a Player,
Right.
right? And it was like when you saw that though, it was like, oh, that was cool. And then it doesn't take you until you get to like till you live in that life. Some people still like it, but when you live that life, then you realize, oh, this ain't it. And then
Yeah.
you get into the Bible and you say, oh, not only is this not it, but it's also not godly.
Exactly. And I mean, just from like my perspective, I mean, it can go the same way because obviously to a certain extent, like for women, it's like, oh, like you should have a lot of bodies because, you know, with women, then you're called, you know, some not nice words, you know what I mean? But when it comes to women, like there's been situations where I've known women who still like have that thought process, oh, like, oh, I gotta get with so and so, like he's fine, like, you know, if I get with him, then oh, then that would be crazy, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that's just like the mindset that we just have to like get rid of, like just throw it away.
Yeah, I think the call for only seeking relationships simply for the sex is something that, like you said, we have to get away from. But let me ask you the question, how do we get away from it?
From being obedient, like, and just focusing on, well, first off, before getting away from it, you have to make the decision if you want to even get away from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you could sit there and talk about it all day, but are you going to take the actions to do that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because when it comes to lust, like, basically, lust is a temptation. Even Jesus was tempted,
Yeah.
but it's how you act upon it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to take those steps beforehand to even want to be able to stop.
Yeah.
And then once you get to that point, yes, there will be those temptations, but you have to remember what the Word of God says, and you have to be obedient to God's word. And it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. Yeah, just similar to like you say, like you just have to make that decision. Like how basically, I know it was tough for us in the beginning of like making that decision in our relationship. I think a lot of it falls on me definitely because I wasn't not necessarily seeking relationships for sex, but I definitely felt like sex had to be a requirement.
Yeah.
And it never allowed me to really get to know the real you, because of it. And I feel like it also kind of like made you have a lot of questions for me, in the sense of like, is this like a real man of God?
Yeah. And like, I guess just to add on to that, because coming into the relationship, I did not want to like do anything. Like, I didn't even want to touch y'all. If y'all remember, if y'all seen that, the episode about when we were talking about how we met or whatever, and we were in the movie theater, and I was like, all right, we're gonna go to the movies, and I'm gonna like kind of test him to see like if he even touched my kneecap, I would have been like, all right, I'm not talking to him no more. Thankfully, he didn't. But in the beginning of our relationship, did not I didn't have like any like sexual desires, none of that, because I wanted to know who he truly was. And I want to get away from like the sexual relationships because those weren't doing anything for me, I guess you would say. And I was on my walk, well, I mean, I still am, but on my walk with God and trying to get right because I was trying to find my husband, you know what I mean? But then as we like started, dating or whatnot, I went back into some of my old ways, and then, we started having sex about that. But then when we had our conversation and we were like, hey, we need to cut this out, like just throw it all away, basically. Yeah, cut it out because we were playing in God's space. But once we like full on stopped, like I felt like our relationship got so much better. And like we just started like learning like everything. Like we took the time to just learn about each other.
For sure. Definitely. I feel like the lust was blocking the love. It's something that I just want to make sure that we not only address, but like we break the cycle. We break the cycle with this generation. Like if there was a whole world of generational curses that when it comes to like this sex, we break it. That as Christian men and women, that we can come together and have Christ-like relationships fully, not, you know what I'm saying, playing in God's face, not 1 foot in, 1 foot out, that we're going to go to church, but then we're going to have, or we're going to go to this and we're going to, you know what I'm saying? But like just really fully be about it. And I think the problem is that because I know personally for me, it was hard for me to like love myself. And because I had a bad relationship with love with myself, then it kind of like bleeds on other relationships in your life. Like if you don't really love yourself, then you're not going to treat yourself with the respect. And so then it's hard for you to treat others with respect. And then you definitely don't have a respectful relationship with God because you know you're not supposed to be doing this. We had tons of conversations that we're going to stop. We're not doing it no more. And then we fall back and be like, dang, how we got back to this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, it's all about removing the lust so that we can make room for the love.
So let me ask you this question. So for someone who, I guess, like us, are the relationships new, help them, well, they're in the beginning of the relationships, right? Help them figure out how to not get too deep into like having, I mean, just sex all the time. You know what I mean? Like how to just go and cut it off.
Like like they're having sex or they're not having sex?
They are.
So the relationship just started and they're having sex?
Yeah.
And like how to stop having sex?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, without just stopping, basically. Obviously, that's just the.
So I think it's about communication. I feel like both of you have to be on one accord about why you're not having sex anymore. Like the problem that we had, I know personally, was that we were doing it out of the sake of religion versus out of the sake of the relationship to have with God. It wasn't until we started seeking God for real together that it made sense why we stopped having sex. Because we know not only like the religious versus the religious part of it was like, we know that this is like something that goes against what God wants for us, but you don't really know why until you start actually seeking Him, and then like, oh, it's because He has so much more in store. Like I honestly don't know if we would have kept having sex if we're gonna be in the position that we are right now to be getting married, because there's a lot.
Because I feel like sex in a way kind of blinds people.
For sure.
Yeah, well, it does.
Yeah.
And so, like you said before, I don't think we would be in the position we are today because we would have just kept being blinded.
Yeah. And that's where it goes back to the communication, where it's important to go deep, because the deeper you go, the light starts to expose the darkness, right? But like, if you keep avoiding that and you keep trying to stay in the darkness, like the darkness will avoid the light as much as possible. It hates to be shown to the light.
Yeah.
Right. But when you have uncomfortable conversations, when you start saying like, why are we even having sex in the first place? When you start actually wanting to know the person and not just the person's parts, then you really can start building a whole brand new relationship with the person. Because I feel like once we stopped having sex, we had a whole nother relationship. And it was like something that was more, not only just like, oh, because we stopped having sex, it was more Christ-like, but it was a genuine relationship, because now it was like, it wasn't me just trying to know her body, but I really wanted to know her heart. I wanted to know what that was. I wanted to know how she thought. I wanted to know more things about her, simply because I wanted to be a better man for her. It wasn't just about sexual relationships, you know what I mean? It wasn't just about like sex in general.
Yeah.
And I think the thing for anybody else who's in a relationship right now and they want to stop having sex, or they're watching this and they're like, man, maybe we do need to stop having sex.
Yeah.
First of all, if you're not married, then you should stop having sex.
Mm-hmm.
But don't take it from me as if I'm somebody that's just saying follow the law, follow religion.
Yeah.
But like, take it as somebody who is saying that I was once like you, and once I actually started building a relationship with God for myself, then I realized that He had so much more in store for us as as a future married couple, and that like the sex is supposed to be like a prized possession, and it isn't supposed to be given away cheaply. You know what I mean? It isn't a cheap thrill that like the world makes you think it is. And you realize that like I was saying before, once you start loving God and you start building this great understanding that He loved you first and that you are valuable, then you won't just give your body away to anybody.
Yeah, and just going off of that love, the process of like just basically ripping off the band-aid and cutting it all out, it won't be easy. You will still have those desires, but at the end of the day, like, he was saying, you have to remember God's love, God's commandments, and, what the word says. And that will help you get through those like temptations, because they will come up. There's been some times I'll say, okay, it looks pretty good. But at the end of the day, like the longer that like we've like stopped having sex basically, like I won't say I don't get those desires, but it's very rare. So it's like you'll get to the point where you'll just not even think about it. Like you don't care really about it. And that's like once you get to that point, you're like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I can actually do this. And like you can do it.
Yeah. I think something that has been helpful for me too is knowing that I don't have to focus on not having sex. I just have to focus on God. Like, no matter how big, no matter how big the temptation or the issue or the problem is, God's bigger. And so once you place so much more focus on Him, then you realize like this matters so much more. And once you draw near to Him, He'll draw near to you, and your desires will begin to change. And the things that used to tempt you and that you would fall into temptation, like the things that would trip you up, you begin to step over. And so like building that relationship with God is why it needs to be the foundation of your relationship. This is why you need Christ-like relationships, equally yoked relationships in the first place. But everybody doesn't necessarily start like that, right? Like we didn't even start like that. You know what I mean? So it's like, to say that you should find a man of God or a woman of God, and that, you know what I mean, that is the ideal thing, that you're already like that, but that's just not, realistic for everybody. And so if you're already going through those situations, start making God the foundation of your relationship. Start making God the thing that you're looking up to. Idolize God, not sex. Idolize God, not even your sex, not even your partner, but idolize God. Make sure God is number one. And whatever you're doing, make sure that you're like whatever the focus is, make sure it leads back to him.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this: for somebody who is who has cut out sex and then they start having temptations and stuff like that, give examples, or if you have any, of what you do when like you start having those temptations. Is there like anything, like do you listen to gospel music? Do you pray? Like examples like that to help
Yeah.
you get away from it.
So one of the things that there's not like I don't have like a set structured plan of like when I face temptations. But one of the things that I always tell myself, because like I even had like I said, like I struggle with pornography, and I had a whisper in the back of my mind that said, we should watch porn today. Tell you, it's just like that, verbatim. And then like I got up and I was like, everything that God has for me is way more valuable than what this world can bring me. Like everything that God is giving you and has for you is going to lead you to everlasting life.
Yeah.
Nothing else. Everything else, like God leads you to sustainability. Everything that God is bringing you will be sustained. Everything the world brings you will subside. And so it's not worth losing. Like, no offense, but like sex with you right now is not worth losing anything that God has promised for me. You know what I mean? And so that's one of the things that I always tell myself whenever I do face temptation. If it's like pornography or sex or anything like that, or even if it's just like idolizing other people,
Yeah.
right? Or any kind of thing, anything where it's just taking me off the path that God has placed me on to be who he's called me to be with the purpose that he's created me for. I just remind myself that there's nothing that this world can bring me or give me that's worth losing what God has for me. And so that's just something that I'm like really rooted in.
Yeah, for sure.
What about you?
I mean, same with that. But then I know too, like in the past when I would like, I guess you would say really struggle or it'd be hard, I just pop on some gospel music and just start singing, get my mind off it, do anything to get my mind up, like, pray. But other than that, like it's usually like kind of funny. But whenever I have those thoughts in my head, I'm like, and like be quiet, like basically sitting there talking to myself, because you have to talk yourself through it. It's like
For sure.
you can't just sit there and ignore it. You have to like face the problem, face the situation head on.
Yeah.
And the more that you do that, like the more like you'll be able to work through situations like that.
Yeah, the more you're willing to deny your flesh, the more you realize that you aren't a slave to it. The more you realize that you're not a slave to your temptations, that you're not a slave to sex, that Jesus broke every chain.
Yeah.
And all you have to do is be willing to take off the shackles because he's already freed you.
Right.
And you have the freedom to choose to step into where God has for you.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the other things that I think is good for me too is sometimes you just gotta rebuke it.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Like I don't have time for that.
Right? I'm like, Satan, get behind me. Because I know for sure that this is nothing but the enemy.
Right.
Because I promise you, Satan only needs, biblically it says it, but Satan only needs a foothold. Right? Satan only needs a foothold. And that one foothold, that one step, that one misstep that you take,
like, I got you.
it can lead you down so much despair.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it's a great decision at the time, right? But it's like those moments of pleasure
it's
so
not
much
worth it.
Never worth it. It's never worth it. I promise you it isn't. And it just leads to so much despair, leads to so much disappointment, so much that disobedience always has consequences.
Situations.
It always has consequences. Now that we've like cut sex out, what do you think the removal of sex has opened basically the opportunity for?
To like spend more time together. We like to do a lot of card games. We play like Battleship, do a lot of activities like outside of the house, try new food, new restaurants, and then also we have like some deep conversations that where we really get to know each other, like for real, for real. He always makes me cry in a good way. But what about you?
Yeah, I think definitely for me, I think it's definitely just going deeper.
Yeah.
Um, being more vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
with each other. That's something that I care a lot about.
Yeah.
Just really knowing our foundation and where it's rooted,
Mm-hmm.
and then like what our troubles are.
Mm-hmm.
Like communication is just so huge in a relationship, and I feel like a lot of times your temptation or your lust for somebody else, it blocks a lot of those conversations. And that's something that's definitely opened up for us
Mm-hmm.
in a new way, because we had tough conversations even before, but now I get to know, like, I always tell her to just go deeper, right? And
He does.
and really just like be able to articulate how you feel that's not surface level. And that's like something that's huge for me, and I feel like it's so valuable for relationships.
Yeah.
Because like the question that we never even asked ourselves is like, why are we even having sex before marriage in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then why did why did we have sex? Speaking, hindsight now, why did we have sex before marriage?
I don't even have an answer for you. I think we were just doing it just to be doing it. Pastime.
Probably.
There was no reason behind it, honestly.
I think for me, I think I'm gonna go deeper.
Okay.
I think for me personally, I think having sex before marriage was something that it always felt like it was something to. Oh yeah, okay. Now I know what I was saying. Okay, yeah. So having sex before marriage always just felt like it was like a quick grasp at love without obtaining the real thing, or even having to do the real work of a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It was like you can get to the best part of the relationship without actually building it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like skipping the steps. It's like, okay, I can obtain everything that God has promised. I can attain everything that God has promised from being married now.
Yeah.
Without actually being a man of God, without actually having to be her husband, without actually having to be these things. And it's not necessarily saying that I'm coming in like a menace, like I'm about to go, but it's more so like where that comes from, because of the fact that it's like that's essentially what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it goes the other way around too. It's like essentially we want the cherished thing that God has put aside for marriage. We want that now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm catching revelation here, but it's the same thing with how we want things to happen on our own time.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want to wait for what God has for us.
Mm-hmm.
We just want
That's
it now.
impatient.
We want everything now. We want everything. And the problem with it now, it brings me back to my favorite verse, but Proverbs 20:21, an inheritance gained too hastily at the beginning will not be a blessing at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that it's a reason why God has set this thing aside. It's a reason, and it talks about, we see it, that he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains the favor of the Lord. There's favor that comes with finding a wife.
Mm-hmm.
There's favor with obtaining the blessings that comes with marriage. But a lot of times, I say this a lot just as men, speaking to any men or women who know men, that it's so important that as men we reshape the way that we think, and that we stop looking to men of this world to be our role models, and that we actually look at who the biggest role model for a man should be, that we look at Jesus Christ as our role model, and we see like there is no better man to show you how to be a man. And it's so important, because I found so much freedom when I stopped seeking sex. I found so much liberation. I realized, oh my gosh, God has so much for me. If I can just get out of my own way, if I can just deny myself, deny these subsiding pleasures for the sustaining grace of God.
Yeah.
And it's such a pivotal step in my journey, that I just know that there's so many men out there who just need to hear this. There's so many men out here that just need to get this freedom of their own, but it's already given. God has freely freed them from the situation that they feel like they're trapped in.
Yeah.
And I mean, it goes back to it goes even further. Like this sex thing goes so deep. Oh my gosh. It has generational curses behind it. It has broken marriages, divorces, trauma, all these other things behind it, simply because we have not denied our flesh so that we can step into what God has promised for us. And it irks my nerves. It really does.
Yeah.
Because I know my family was a victim until I became a victor, and now I can start the new way. But the problem is there's so many other people who are blind to it, and they're still repeating these same offenses, that they're still living this life of adultery. They're still living, what did Jesus say? That they have not they haven't plucked that right eye. They have not plucked that right eye, because they're still looking at these women in a lustful way.
Yeah.
And the problem is what you were saying earlier, that even Jesus was tempted, but what matters more than being tempted is how you react to it. A lot of these men are falling for it. They're allowing, they're surrendering to their flesh. They're not fighting it. And I think the reason why they're fighting, or why they're losing, is because they're trying to do it in their own strength.
Yeah.
I have a lot of people, they reach out to me and they say, I've been trying to stop doing this, or I've been trying to stop doing that, and I keep losing. The number one thing I try to tell them is, stop trying to fight the battle on your own.
Yeah.
The battle is not yours, it's the Lord's. If you just submit and surrender unto him and give it to Jesus, saying, God, I can't do it by myself. You're trying to do it on your own strength, and you was never meant to. You're trying to carry the world, and you were never meant to. Your shoulders, God never designed your shoulders to carry that load. And so it's been so necessary for me to tell people, don't worry about the problem, because if you're worrying about the problem, ultimately worrying about the problem is worshiping the problem. Stop worrying about the problem and fixate your eyes on God, because God got the cure for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sorry. I really get deep in this because it means so much to me that there's freedom from sex, because it has its own hold. I mean, y'all, if y'all just look in this world, y'all see it with like OnlyFans and like all these things. There's so much money being made from sex, and it's corrupting us. It's not even corrupting. It's not just corrupting like adults, but they get in our kids.
Yeah, for
like
sure.
It's getting to the kids, it's getting to the babies, y'all. And so it's like, it's so necessary that we break this bondage that we have, that it has on us, and we know where the cure really is, and that's in God. Yeah, but I mean, you have any last words? I don't know why
Stop having sex.
I said any last words, like it was a movie. like this over for you. No, but y'all, we're so appreciative of y'all. And like we said in the beginning, we want this to be a community. We want this to feel like, even when we have these conversations with each other, we're saying things that we haven't even said to each other sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it's like, y'all in here with us, and we want y'all to not only feel like that when y'all listen or watch it, but that y'all also feel like there's more to this than just listening in on our conversations. We want to definitely nurture a community, because like I said, this is one of the topics that I'm really, really passionate about, because it's really attacking us. It's really spiritual warfare, to be honest. And some of us getting knocked across the head and we don't even know where the blow coming from, honestly. And we know that, you know what I mean, the battle is not with flesh and blood, but it's against evil and principalities. And so, there's a community that we want to kind of start with this. Like she said, leave comments. We're trying to figure out how to develop it. It'll be great. We don't even know. what it looks like.
We don't.
Right now, we're just trying to be obedient as possible because we know that there's a reason for why God called us to this. And we also know that there's a reason why it's sometimes even difficult for us to get on camera.
Yeah.
Right? And it's usually never difficult for me. Y'all know I talk a lot.
It's difficult for me.
But it's harder with her, and I know it's not, and I know it's because we have so much of a calling around this that the devil is trying his hardest to kind of just make us fearful of what God is calling us to do. But God has us, and we won't be afraid, y'all. And I hope that y'all feel this energy as well, to know that regardless of what your flesh is trying to make you do, regardless of how the enemy is trying to distract you, or even your own thoughts that you feel like sometimes your biggest enemy is your enemy, that God has you. And if God has you, who can be against you? If God's fighting for you, there's no one who can stand against you. So we really appreciate y'all for watching and viewing this, where all podcasts are watched and viewed. Yep. And we'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.